Hi, Misha here, and I don't know, we can call it a Blackbox Friday, but yeah, this seems to be about the time I feel like doing some updates, and thought I'd talk about a few things, including the whole kind of recent over the last month or so UAP thing, unknown aerial phenomena. UFO thing in the government. It's kind of an interesting situation, and been going on for 4 years. But I think over the last year, because of politics and the Corona thing, it got swept under the rug a bit. Just kind of not intentionally, just kind of when you have a bunch of headlines, things like that, kind of slip down. And I find it very interesting. And talk about that and a few other updates. The gun world, it seems like finally ammo is a little bit more available. Still kind of pricey, but you can still pick up 9mm 7.62 by 39. The hardest thing to get right now, at least for anything like a reasonable price, I would say would be 223 5.56 NATO, but hopefully that'll change. I will say in the last week or two, I've noticed that the gun market has kind of slowed down a bit. Before, any kind of AK I had up would sell out pretty quick, and now they're actually staying in for a little while. Things are still selling, but yeah, they're slowing down a bit, which is honestly a good thing. It's been a madhouse for coming up on 16 months, and that's just too much. And distributors are starting to get a few things in. For example, I had a PSL come in from Century last week. Another batch of the Polish mini barrel pistols came in. A batch of Fox rifles, again from Poland, although WBP instead of FB. And let's see, a few news Estaba things, mostly the pistols. And couple new arsenals, the fixed stock, the folders. What else? A few HKs, SP5s, SP5Ks, MR556s, MR762s. Not in huge numbers, but, becoming available. So we'll see where we're at. For the last couple of weeks, I've mostly been keeping it going by selling off the Swiss guns, but I don't really feel like talking about those in this video, just because it's been kind of a primary topic for a while now. But anyway, like I said, kind of want to talk about the UAP situation. It's an interesting thing, and maybe younger generations, it maybe doesn't seem so, but to have the government admitting that there are unknown phenomenon in the sky, I mean, again, no one's saying what they are, just, that they don't readily know. That's all. No more, no less. That might not seem so earth-shattering, but for the federal government to admit they don't know anything is already an achievement. And when I was a kid, that was the time of weather balloons and Venus and all that being kind of blamed or credited for all that. And most things were just kind of ignored that didn't fit in. On the other hand, you had a bunch of honestly unsubstantiated, unverified claims that a lot of the so-called UFOologists would just take at face value. So you had a situation where anything the government said was just automatically disbelieved. And anything that the pro-UFOs, all these accounts, people would say, they would just take it at face value without any kind of proof whatsoever. And I definitely believe that, claims need proof, and the crazier the claim, the more proof you need. But that said, mathematically and scientifically, there has to be life elsewhere in the universe, extremely likely in the galaxy, and even possibly life on some level in the solar system. This is just mathematically almost a fact. I mean, I guess there's always that teeny tiny hair of, what if, but yeah, you know what I mean. So that's what's one thing that's kind of neat. A lot of the other conspiracy theories and other things, scientifically, yeah. But this is one where scientifically it almost has to happen. But of course that's a long way off from saying that life reaches intelligent level, which I also think must be true. I'd kind of be terrified to think we live in a universe where humans are the height of evolution. Just look at our entertainment, our politicians, and some of our, frankly, quote-unquote art. But anyway, so I would say there has to be in life that's as or more intelligent than us. That seems so likely. Now, can that life cross the nearly insurmountable void, even between nearest star systems? Again, I don't think a lot of people have a true comprehension of how vast space is and how much of nothingness is in between even nearest bodies in space. Yeah. Oh, and that goes doubly true for J.J. Abrams. After watching his Star Trek and Star Wars, it's clear the man thinks that space is like between here and the moon. Yeah. But crossing the void is doable, but it would require significant time and resources and, frankly, danger. But it's possible. So, if there's an intelligent species that could cross the void, this is possible. Maybe even likely, but not at a high level. Now, of all the other planets in our galaxy and the universe, would they come here? Possible. And would they come here repeatedly? Then you have to ask the question, why? I definitely don't know about frequency, but there are so many unknown factors that it gets to the point I can't make a judgment or calculation because we just don't have even enough facts to set up a framework. But all of this is theoretically possible. But is it true? Is it likely that people are, all these things are happening? I hesitate to call anyone a liar, but there are plenty of alternative explanations or theories that, in the absence of evidence, have to at the very least be given equal footing. There's claims of abduction, there's claims of visitations, yet there's never any evidence, physical evidence, which seems odd. And then you even hear these things about implants that people find in their bodies. Great, but then they always seem to mysteriously lose them or have them taken away. I can tell you, if I found something like that, I would guard it like I was Fort Knox and it was gold and the Penguin was coming to break in. 1960s Batman reference there. Hoo-yah. So that is a little convenient, or lack thereof. I'm not saying it's impossible. Again, I don't call anyone a liar, but there are social and psychological alternatives, or even just, terrestrial alternatives. And to keep, to be fair, when you say UFO, you're not jumping to anything extraordinary, extraterrestrial, or supernatural. You're just saying unknown. And that, and if it turns to be a known thing, like a satellite or another aircraft or whatever, no one lied. You were just reporting it was unidentified. It happens all the time. Perfectly fair. So, in this, when I grew up, reports of flying saucers or whatever were pretty common. Heck, I remember once when I was not terribly young, maybe 12, my dad was out in our backyard. He'd walked out in the backyard, I think, to let the dogs out or in, and he was standing there looking up at the sky and saw something, and my mother came out, looked up and saw it too, and then she was saying, "Bob, come in." She was a little nervous. He was the kind of person that wanted to stare and look at it, because, if we had a storm or a tornado coming, we live in tornado country, he'd be the one sitting out on the porch drinking a beer watching the tornado roll in. He was just that way. So he definitely saw something, and she saw it too. Obviously, aside from being there, I couldn't tell you. In the same backyard, maybe 8 years later, I was sitting out with a friend. I was on my swing, much as I am now, and he was laying in a hammock. I always used to like to have a hammock around, and we were just chatting about, music, girls, what have you. I think we were home from college. It's freshman year, maybe sophomore. He was just chatting, and he just goes, "I think I saw a freaking UFO." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, I just saw something," and he described it. And it could have been a satellite. A lot of people don't understand that satellites don't necessarily go, horizontally. They can go vertical. There are satellites that transverse the poles. Yet, the way he described it sounded interesting. Again, he just said UFO. And that's about it. We stayed out there talking for a little bit longer. I don't remember any time skips. There was also another time when I was out at the cabin, which many of you met now, where my friends saw something. And both my dad and my stepmother said when they were young, they saw things. It's separate times when they were younger. So people around me have seen things, and we just, it started and ended there. Those kinds of accounts were pretty common and pretty well accepted. People see things. The abduction thing was kind of coming into vogue in the 80s. Obviously, the Hills case in the 60s, was kind of the first, at least modern one. But you didn't start to hear about them much until the 70s and 80s. And, of course, everyone knows Unsolved Mysteries, which terrorized all of us kids for generations. Fun show, though. And then, of course, later you had X-Files and all that stuff. Even before Unsolved Mysteries, you had the one that Leonard Nimoy did. What was that called? In Search Of? I think he did 2 very closely related shows, but, that was a thing. But I never knew anyone who reported that themselves. Now, one fun thing, too, whenever UFOs or archaeological books or whatever came in the library when I was a kid, the librarian would hold them back for me, and then typically I'd take them home and my mother would read them to me, or a friend would. And that's where I first learned about the whole Men in Black thing. And yeah, today that's kind of a trope. It's a comic, it's a film series. Tommy Lee Jones is a great actor. But back in the 80s, that was terrifying. They were creepy and weird and fringe, and yeah, it's hard to convey the elements that they embodied back then. Just kind of goes to show you time and how it changes. And over the last couple of decades, it's become more and more common, almost a joke, with the whole ancient aliens thing, and the History Channel kind of turning from being the Hitler Channel into the Pawn Stars / Alien Channel. But it has become more socially acceptable. There's certainly not a stigma against reporting seeing a UFO. Abductions, people might look at you a little more askance, but there's also plenty of communities out there to support people who claim to have this thing happen. And I would say this, most people that report abductions, it's very clear that something traumatic happened to them. So they absolutely should not be mocked and ridiculed. They should be comforted and listened to and supported. I 100% believe that, no matter what happened. So it's become more and more socially acceptable. And now we have this whole government UAP situation. Very interesting. The government has always kind of taken it, and it took it a little bit serious because of Blue Book, and then it kind of cooled off. Now, one thing I find interesting is these military jets that are purporting these things, plus the cruisers, like the Ticonderoga class that the Princeton was, or is, I suppose. She's still in service. They're picking these things up with new, more modern sensors, infrared, visual, and other forms of FLIR. And I have to wonder if our technology is finally kind of catching up to the point where there's ability to really track artifacts. In the past, there have been radar returns, but there also have been just as many instances where pilots report seeing something, but, radar on the ground is saying, we got nothing. So it's kind of been a hit or miss with radar. But in modern times, you have to wonder if our computer-assisted technology with much more sensitive instrumentation is finally able to detect something, a disturbance, a wake, what have you. Very interesting, I think, because we start to see these video reports and whatnot, and they've only declassified a handful of videos. Makes you wonder how many are still classified. I would have to wager the juicier ones are still classified, that they would declassify the most vanilla and frankly easily dismissed ones. And again, I'm not saying these videos are proof. They're too cloudy, they're too vague, and even the Navy themselves admit these are copies of copies. They're not the master originals, and they've lost a lot of fidelity. So if they seem grainy or what have you, kind of blobby, keep in mind these are mostly infrared videos. No surprise, because they are not the originals. But it is a step in the fact that the government has come out and just said that. And the timing is interesting too. Going back, and I remember listening to this firsthand on, quite frankly, a lot of the old quack History Channel quote-unquote documentaries about UFOs. All these whistleblowers were claiming that the government would slowly start trickle truthing, I think they say, the evidence out to present a new threat to this country after we had kind of gone through the Soviets, potentially the Chinese, quote-unquote terrorism, and now the next threat could be potentially extraterrestrials. At least, kind of dangling out there. And sure enough, a lot of those truthers at that time were saying around, 2020 was the kind of the plan. And sure enough, that's kind of when this is all coming out. And it was released at a certain time where they could release it, but it wouldn't make a huge flap. Again, with all the political stuff going on. But people could look back and go, wait now, so they said what now? They did what? And, yeah, it doesn't look like the report to Congress coming out at the end of this month is going to be earth-shattering, but you have to wonder what else might come out. And keep in mind, this is all on top of further exploration of Mars and other parts of our solar system. So it's not like this might not be the only way to discover life. And thanks to more modern sensors and telescopes, we've been able to discover many extrasolar planets. In the past, not long ago, we can only detect, say, large gas giants. Now we're actually able to detect rocky bodies, and even better yet, ones in the so-called Goldilocks zone. And we've detected several that potentially could be habitable within just a few light years of Earth, which means, look, if we're seeing planets that we could potentially live on with very little assistance in just a couple of, handfuls of light years, say 10 to 20, maybe 30 light years from Earth, that's not even our backyard in galactic terms. That's like on our back porch step. So if that's what we're seeing just looking around immediately out of our back door, what if we start exploring our backyard? Our street, our block, our town, our county. That means that Earth, which we thought may be this rare convergence of everything, temperature and atmosphere and stability, maybe we're just not that rare. Maybe every couple of other solar systems has a planet analogous to Earth. Heck, we even have Mars in our own solar system, and while we couldn't live on Mars, it's foreseeable that in the distant past, some other species, intelligent or otherwise, could live on Mars. And that's not even, accounting for places like, say, Europa. Yeah, I'm just saying, if we're seeing this just in our own solar system and just right outside of it, I'd say the chances of intelligent life are seeming more and more possible on that level. NASA seems to be quite optimistic about maybe, possibly, perhaps finding, micro life in the next couple of decades. That'd be awesome. And then we have this UAP stuff coming out from the government. And of course we do have all the human reports from Earth. And with cell phones and everything coming out, it's easy to record. Of course it's also easy to fake. It's not just that people might innocently mistake what they see. It's definitely possible that people could just lie. I know that's a shocker, but some people simply lie and do hoaxes. But we have all these different prongs on the same fork, and only one of them has to touch something. And if that happens, well, it'll be very interesting and right up there with one of the most iconic events in human history. And frankly, I think at first a lot of people won't really acknowledge it, especially if we just say discover microbiology on another planet or what have you. People might go, well, that's neat, but I think the full weight, the full implications will eventually hit. Now, of course, if extraterrestrials landed in D.C. on the White House front lawn and introduced themselves, that'd probably get a little more attention, frankly. But either way, I don't know. It seems like, maybe 20 years from now, nothing will have changed. Or maybe we'll have complete explanations for the UAP stuff. On the other hand, I don't know. Call it a gut feeling. And I'm certainly kind of hopeful for it, because it would be historically exceedingly interesting. I don't know. I think we might just be on the cusp of something. And that is really, really interesting. It's the kind of stuff that that's real news to me. Politics and all this jazz, it is what it is. But that's pushing the human species. That's pushing potential technology forward. That's taking a step in the right direction. And that's the kind of stuff that I wish and hope our society to go forward with. But we'll see. I don't know, I just kind of felt like talking about that tonight. What do you think? I'd be interested to kind of get other people's takes and opinions on this. I think it is super cool. And even if it turns out to be nothing, even just people having the open mind is a positive thing, in my opinion. And it is nice to focus on something other than politics or corona or any of this shit. It's nice to kind of just, muse and think about what could be, what might be in the future. I would sure be happy if I woke up one morning and that was the news, one way or the other. How would you feel? Would you be scared? Would you be exhilarated? Would you not know what to feel? I'd be kind of interested in other people's takes. And with that, I'll wrap up another Blackbox here this Friday. I hope everyone has a good weekend. It's been really hot here. It went from 70s to low 90s, but the real killer is the humidity. For the last week, it's felt like it should storm every day, and it hasn't. And the humidity during the days have been about 80%. And then right now, I just checked before coming out, and it was 94% humidity. I don't know how it's not raining. God, it should be. So it's kind of one of those times where it just drains the energy out of you. So I've been kind of low energy, low key lately. Sorry if that kind of comes across in the videos, but it's just getting on towards the dog days of summer. So, kind of makes me wish I lived up north at times like these. Although we just looked at Omaha, and they're not exactly running cool right now. But I will say I'm glad I'm not in Phoenix. Jesus, that is not a place I'd want to be right now. But with that, yeah, I wish you a great weekend. Please feel free to comment down below with your opinions and thoughts on this. And I'll catch you very soon. This is Misha. Be back next time.